Hi, this is Stephen Reifman here again, founder of the Reifman Law Firm. And we're doing our law raps and we're doing a little series on my experiences with Rosa Parks. So as things went along, the press was all over the Parks people. They seemed to have an axe to grind and they were kind of making sure that we were taking care of Mrs. Parks properly and that we weren't using her for our own purposes. And of course, none of us were, but it was the press had this idea that Mrs. Parks maybe was being manipulated. So at one point, she actually had a fall in her apartment. And the press would say, well, these people aren't taking care of her, and they were all over. So she wound up going into the hospital. And there was articles daily in the paper, in the Free Press, the news, about what was going on with the Parks Institute and Mrs. Parks. So she got out after a few days and returned home. And after a few more days, it was a Sunday. And one of the things we did as a group to show people that we were caring for Mrs. Parks appropriately, we publicized the fact that Mrs. Parks was going to go to her church on Petoskey Street in Detroit. Petoskey is a little back street near to Grand River. And they said, Steve, would you accompany Mrs. Parks? Because she is a little frail at this point, coming out of the hospital and everything. I said, well, I'd be glad to. So I met with Mrs. Parks and we drove to the church and I helped her get into the church and we sat in the back room for a while. And a couple children came in to visit with her because they wanted to see the icon. These are black children. It was a black church on the west side of Detroit. And we sat for a while there, and I actually have the pictures, which we'll show as part of this presentation, of myself with Mr. Parks that day. And then we went inside to the church. And I had limited help, limited experiences in the black church. And this may have actually been my first time, and imagine going with Rosa Parks. And we sat together, and of course, the music was phenomenal, the real gospel type music. And it was a great experience for me. And at one point, it's time for the Holy Sacrament. Well, I'm Jewish, and I have a lot of experience with Christian things, and I'm very appreciative of the Christian church and the Catholic church, and experienced it in my travels around the world, and have a great affinity towards the words of Christ. But I'm Jewish, but I'm with Mrs. Parks. Well, it's time for the Holy Sacrament. Well, I went up with her. I had to accompany her, and I said, you know what? I am taking that Holy Sacrament with Rosa Parks because there's no way that Stevie Reifman is missing out on taking the Holy Sacrament with Rosa Parks. And they put that wafer on my tongue, and I felt very good. And I will never forget my wonderful time with Rosa Parks at her church of choice on the west side of Detroit. And we did many legal things with her. We sat with her at the board. But I would have to say that my experience in the church and the taking the sacrament with her probably is one of the highlights of my little life.